Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're doing another installment of the weekly meta breakdown where we look at the top performing decks on the MTG Arena ladder. Today we're focusing on the Timeless best of one format. We'll look at the particular popularity of decks, win rates, both from Untapped GG, what you see on the screen, companion tool that tracks ladder data, and then a couple other instances from community decks or just decks in general, and I'll explain it in a sec. If you're looking for other formats, it'll be in the playlist. We try to get them out once a week, and we'll get that content out. I did put out a notice on my channel just in terms of upcoming weeks. I'm going in for surgery at the end of January, so I'll be off for a couple weeks with limited content during that time. But as always, Untapped GG, we'll get the stats. Link is in the video description if you want to use the tool, track your win rates, as well as leverage some of the content they offer. I'll paste all these deck lists with timestamps so you can lift the information. So Timeless, best of one. Now notably we're having a Timeless creator clash, content creator, 16-person tournament that's being hosted by Aziz the MTG content creator. So there's going to be some lists there. Those will be best of three. We'll take a look at the results. They're also hosting a 1K next weekend as well, so we can see some results from the best of three ladder as well. But we're going to look Platinum to Mythic rank because the ladder just reset. It's beginning of January. Popular decks, Mono Black Control. This is like the Necro decks, 13.8, 14%. Rakdos Burn at about 10. We have Rakdos Midrange. So within this Rakdos Midrange, you're basically getting a combination of like true midrange as well as Rakdos Breach. So just a shade under 9%. Grixis Shadow in here. The one thing with Grixis Shadow is it's getting artificially inflated just with some of the tags on Untapped right now. They're not capturing, or they're capturing things like Tainted Pact or the Grixis Dredge deck as Grixis Shadow. So it's artificially inflating the volume of games that it's being played at. So something to note there. 5-color domain is the domain Zoo deck. Dimir Dredge. So we got like a big kind of conglomerate at about 8%. Then a little bit further down, Jund Midrange and Mono Red Burn. Since the ladder reset, just some like ancillary kind of notes. Like for example, going in, I was playing a lot of Dredge and my Mono Red Blood Moon deck. Towards the end of this month, I was averaging about 65-70% win rate with those. Ladder reset, couldn't buy a win. So it just seems kind of like weird variance maybe, but kind of shifted to burn myself. The one list you'll likely be noticing is not showing up here in popularity, which is not really reflective of at least how much I've seen it on the ladder, is either the Gruul or Mono Green Field of the Dead decks. I'm taking a look. For whatever reason, it doesn't seem like Untapped's categorizing them correctly. So I will show a sample list at the end. The field deck is very good. It's very consistent for what it's doing between the tutor effects with natural order and stuff like that. It's a very strong deck, so it should be included here. Despite we won't have like a definitive win rate, it can put up results fairly consistently. So just kind of looking at the trend, we're seeing Mono Black Control week over week have a big jump, 5%, whereas like the Rakdos Burn deck, we see drop about 5% itself. So kind of a flip-flop there. Outside of that, like Dimir Dredge is picking up, where last week was only about 2%. Did put a video up on the deck. There's kind of two variations going around, one with Brainstorm, one without, that we can take a look at. And then we're just seeing like a reduction in Jund Midrange from past weeks in favor of things like the Rakdos deck itself. The Breach deck's also another good one that could come up, but we'll take a look at the decks themselves. 51,000 games played from December 29th through January 5th, Platinum to Mythic rank. And top performing deck is Dimir Dredge, 66.5%. And like I mentioned, this version of the deck is playing Brainstorm, so this will allow you to kind of manipulate the top of your library. Personally, I've tried this version. I found it, you lose some of your hits and you weren't as consistent with milling. And as well, you are now impacted by Bowmaster, where largely this deck is not impacted by Bowmaster from a draw perspective. A lot of your creatures do get pinged off, so it actually opens you up for more potential to have like multiple Blood Gas, Silver Smote, like your Necromoeba all get pinged off. I'm of that camp. It is putting up a higher win rate this last week than the other version. I'm on the 1 mana like adventure creature, the Merfolk that mills you for. and then the full set of Founding of the Third Paths. That's just personally where I prefer the deck to be, but the results are saying otherwise this week. But the core of the deck, you're kind of self-milling. When you mill over cards like Bloodghast comes back from your graveyard, the Creeping Chill can be cast for free, Narcomoeba comes into play for free, and then if you gain 3 life, Silver Smoke comes into play for free from your graveyard. So it's just a lot of ways to kind of circumvent casting cost, and it's very good against heavy like removal decks because your things just keep coming back. So there's a lot of utility there. Even in of itself, it's not like super weak for the most part against things like Deathrite Shaman because you're often milling like a good chunk. The one thing you need to be mindful of, Wonder is great in this deck because it gives all your creatures flying, but it's one card that can be picked off and kind of screw up your attack at instant speed. The one card that did hurt a lot was Agatha Soul Cauldron. I ran into a Yawgmoth deck. Just consistently once a turn without them having to hold up mana, no summoning sickness, tends to be a little bit more effective there, especially when they can put pressure with like Yogg as well in that case. Not in necessarily consistent order. It's 59%, so it's still a reasonable win rate, but I like to compare these back to back. So this is a Grixis version of the deck. So replacing the Brainstorms for Faithless Looting. Now, if you're going to be playing kind of more impacted by like card draw, you're going to be hit by Bowmaster. I personally like looting better just because at least it puts the cards into your graveyard directly. You're not generally getting ahead on card advantage in the deck, but this is another way to kind of loot through the cards you don't need. Very similar kind of concept, one of Oxogonis. The thing here is your mana base is much worse to Blood Moon, and it's also much more painful into the various burn decks. So Mana Confluence always going to ping you. Fetch Shock is minimum 3 damage, so you're dealing a lot more damage to yourself with this particular build. We then move to Rakdos Midrange, 62%, 61.9, and this is the more fair midrange version, if you would. So you still have Regavans, discard package going with Inquisition over Thoughtseize. Against most of the format, this is fine, but it puts you actually weaker against things like Field of the Dead, where big cards you want to hit are Natural Order or Primeval Titan, which this wouldn't hit with a choice here. Now that matchup's probably pretty bad anyways, so it's kind of hedging your other matchups against Burn and stuff like that. Lightning Bolts, Fatal Pushes, Cheap Removal, along with Sheoldred's Edict. Shamans help you accelerate, control the graveyard, and then D-Tutor to help you find key cards, Bowmasters, Croxas, and a Go Blank to kind of eat away at their hand, exile their graveyard very nicely. The one thing I would probably suggest if you're interested in playing a deck like this is to play a single fetchable greens duel. So whether it be Overgrown Tomb or Stomping Ground, it just gives you the option with the Deathrite Shaman to be able to gain life, as well as pick off things like opponents' Croxas, Uros. Against Burn, helps you offset your life total loss and stuff like that. Also good in like Lurrus Mirrors because you can eat away at their creatures. This is a Lurrus deck. Then go to Mono Black Control, so the most played deck, and this is the Necro version. So this is more on the fair side than the combo side. So there are versions that are playing, Dark Ritual into Necropotence, draw a whole bunch of cards, storm off, Tendrils of Agony you, being able to like beseech the mirror multiple times with like sacking fodder to get the storm count up as well. This version, while you're trying to still turn 1 Necro, just refills your hand, so then you could play like a lot of targeted removal, stuff of that nature. Lurrus lets you just play fair game of rebuying Baubles for card advantage or Orcish Bowmasters. Graveyard Trespasser, slightly harder to kill threat that can eat away at the graveyard, gain you some life. Sheoldred's, like you could technically turn 1 Sheoldred in this deck, or One Ring, which is very powerful. March of Wretched Sorrow, so what you can do is with Necropotence, set a stop on your end step, draw 20 cards, have 1 black mana up, and then pitch everything extra to March of Wretched Sorrow to gain a bunch of life to offset the life loss that you would normally get from Necropotence. So something just to kind of keep in mind there. Then go to Rakdos Breach at 59%. So this deck's actually, I'm starting to learn this one, but I was trying to learn it first while also multitasking, and that was a bad idea because I timed out just from going through the combo loop, but it was actually one that like I had the win, but because I was slow in executing, I actually lost. And this is also a deck that wasn't the best. Sometimes I play on like my iPad at night, and this isn't a deck where you want to be super heavy, click intensive on a little touchscreen. But this version of the deck, you'll see kind of two variants. There's the ones with Ragavan, and then there's the ones with Deathrite Shaman. I like the Deathrite Shaman version more. I picked up the Ragavan one to start for Ragavan, slowly started to trim it. While Ragavan can provide some offense to it, I think Deathrite Shaman helping you generate mana the turn you need it, eating away at your opponent's graveyard, gaining you some life in a pinch is a little bit more useful. And I find Ragavan, if you're not in like an aggressive deck that's naturally looking to attack with multiple creatures, it's not as well suited. But the core of the deck is you want to kind of fill your graveyard where possible. So Stitcher Supplier puts cards into the graveyard, Rage Chandler. And once you get enough cards that you could get going, you can Dark Ritual and you cast Underworld Breach. From there, you can exile 3 cards from your library to recast something from your graveyard. So what you can do is if you have Altar of Dementia out, you can cast the Stitcher Supplier, then it mills you 3 cards. With Altar out, you can sack it, that mills you 3 cards, and then you can kind of keep refilling, keep casting Dark Ritual multiple times. You could Diabolic Intent or Tutor. That helps you find your tendrils, and you just kind of keep recasting Dark Ritual as many times as possible, and then cast tendrils to win. You can also have like 1 to 2 copies of Dragon Rage out that help you surveil to help fuel the graveyard. Really what you're just trying to do is net cards into your graveyard that allow you to then keep storming off. You could still win like the fairway of like Dragon Rage Chandler. I had a game where I had like a few Dark Ritual, turn 2 Luris, recast like Mishra's Bauble with a couple Dark Rituals, so you get some value there. Luris also represents extra copies of Underworld Breach. Then go to Rakdos Burn, 58%. So a lot of the similar elements. This is the deck I've been picking up since. This is the 16 land version. I don't like 16 lands. I think I'm at 18 in my list. But core of the deck, burning out your opponent. So you got like Play with Fires, Ragavans. This one's the enchantment build. So you have Okiba in here in terms of the sagas. So this pings on your the first turn you cast it plus your second turn, so it triggers Spectacle that you can enable both Light Up the Stage and Skewer the Critics. Black spells for Bump of the Night, Eidolon of the Great Revels, you can kind of lock your opponent. I had a game I was on Rakdos Breach, and my opponent goes Eidolon on turn 2, I Fatal Push it. Eidolon on turn 3, I kill it, and then they had another Eidolon. So it's just, you can't really storm off through multiple Eidolons. Even a single Eidolon could be limited in terms of how much you can actually cast in terms of storm. But a lot of burn spells, Swift Spears, kind of recycle, and then you have Luris of the Dream Dead. The one thing I don't love about this particular version is it's playing a lot of pain lines between Mount Doom, Ramanop Ruins, and Sulphurous Springs. When you're an Eidolon deck, a big thing is trying to maintain parity. In this particular instance here, you're dealing a lot of incidental damage to yourself that's skewing the amount of damage you're taking relative to everything else. I'm gonna just see, my profile wasn't loading. Oh, there we go. I'm not sure if I have the burn deck up. I don't. I was playing on my iPad, but I can share my list once I do some more refinement. I'm like 6-1 with it at this point. 5-color Domain is the next deck up, 56%, and we've seen kind of a move away from Oko in these lists in lieu of Minsc Boo, so just more of a proactive threat. Oko helps, I find, in the burn matchups, which is kind of interesting as well. The one card I'm very split on is Stubborn Denial. When it hits amazing, but at times it's often just a dead card in hand, I find more often than not. The version I was trying out as well recently was substituting the Ragavans, some numbers, for Deathrite Shamans, playing those, not playing the Once Upon a Times. Deathrite helps you gain some life, helps control the board as well as graveyard, deals some incidental reach for the deck. I think that one I had up. Another deck that I had like mixed variety with, I could see. So the version I was playing, I was trying a couple copies of Treasure Cruise, a 2-1 split between Oko and Minsc Boo, and then I was on 2 Ragavans, and then the 4 Deathrite Shamans. I started with 4 of the Stubborn Denials, and then just slowly removed more and more copies. I don't know. I find like you want to be very proactive, and then drawing these early in the game, they just don't do much. A lot of the decks can play around it, even things like Field. the big thing is like you need either Kavu or Nashiba Brawler out to enable the Stubborn Denial. And at times it's not consistent enough when you do it. Even just having like Wild Nacatl out or one of the smaller creatures doesn't always guarantee it. So then it's just a really bad force spike, I'm personally finding. The one thing to see this list, so this version's on no Sacred Foundry, 19 or no Stomping Ground. I prefer to have a Stomping Ground in my mana base, and then I play a basic Plains over the basic Forest. The thought of the Plains is it allows you to cast Leyline Binding over a Blood Moon. So that was just kind of my consideration. Not married to any particular. I welcome people's thoughts on this. I know like this is seeing a lot of play in the modern version as well. Every time I've tried it, I've been very disappointed in it. That's kind of my thoughts on it at this point. So this is another case where we see Grixis Shadow kind of misclassifying the deck. So this is Lurrus Tainted Pact. So it's Grixis Lurrus Tainted Pact. Kind of the core of the deck is you want to cast Tainted Pact, exile cards from your library, and then what you can do is the easiest way, you have 4 mana, you cast Thassa's Oracle. With the trigger on the stack, you cast Tainted Pact, exile every card of your library, trigger goes off on Thassa's Oracle, you win the game. You could also use Tainted Pact to kind of set it up. You have 2 copies of each of these, where every other card in the deck, including lands, is a 1-of, so you never find like the second copy of it. So you can kind of dig to find either the other Tainted Pact or to find your other combo piece. The deck itself, we're not going to go through every single card, but it's basically hand hate, counter spells, and removal. It's keeping you alive, interacting with your opponent to prevent them, and then helping you find like your combo pieces. Expressive Iterations, Demonic Tutors, you have your Delve card draw effects in here as well. So, cool card deck. Another deck I wouldn't play on mobile, probably, just from the clicking, but kind of showing up in those numbers. So going to the Titan deck, so there's predominantly, you'll see more often than not, the mono green version. There's also a Gruul version that's shown up in some extent with Fable the Mirror Breaker in there, and the 3 mana elf that when it comes into play, the 1/1 that gets a land into play. Mono green one's probably just a little bit more consistent mana wise, but the core of the deck is you're using both a Boreal Grazer and Kami of Bamboo Groves. What they'll do is help you ramp up early. You're using full sets of Once Upon a Time Natural Order to find your key lands. The nice thing with these creatures is while they also ramp you, and similar with Fierce Empath helping you find your Primeval Titan, all of them are then fodder that you can then use Natural Order with, sometimes as early as turn 3 to find Primeval Titan. In a pinch, you also have Titan of Industry, which is helpful to blow up Blood Moons or just gain you life. It's a big body, similar with Generous Ent as well, that can also be tutored for a land. Kami also has a nice thing where later in the game you can channel it to just get 2 lands to play. Splunking lets your lands come into play untapped. It could also gain you some life. Now, with the mana base is where kind of some of the interesting things are. Kalani Garden can also produce a creature that can be natural ordered. You have Bajuka Bog that can shut off the Breach combo, Dredge combos, stuff of that nature. With a red mana source and Hammer Battlements, you're able to give a creature haste for the turn, so depending on how much mana you have, you can set it up where Primeval Titan could come into play and get haste the same turn it comes into play. Castle Garenbrig helps you get accelerate on mana to hardcast. You pair that with Sunken Citadel, so Sunken Citadel lets you add 2 mana to spend activated abilities and mana. So with this, you can basically, with 3 mana, activate the Castle Garenbrig. And then that makes 6 mana, so on turn 3 you could Primeval Titan. Field of Dead's in here, Cavern of Souls for uncounterable, Blast Zone as a way to blow up like 1-drops predominantly, sometimes 3-drops, and then or 2-drops, whatever you want, and then Radiant Fountain for some cheeky life gain in there. And then last one, found the cool one from content creator Delmo. They went 20 and 10 with this one. It is a vampire combo deck, and with this deck, kind of the core, Dark Ritual, turn 1, you cast Sorin Impervious Bloodlord, and then you can drop either Galta and Maverin or Lord Xander if it's in your hand on turn 1, which is kind of cool. If not, you have like a Night Pack or a Vampire package, Knight of Even Legion, Cordial Vampire. When creatures die, you get to put counters on your other vampires. Gifted Aetherborn as a lifelinker and Death Toucher. You also have the Dark Ritual necropotence line to refill your hand. And then it's just like removal, Fatal Push, March. So it's kind of combining the Necro deck that we saw with like a Vampire combo deck. So somewhat different than Storm, and then just attacks. A lot of the decks probably don't have an answer to like early Galta or Lord Xander. A lot of the removals either like Bolt or Fatal Push. There's not like dedicated go for the throat style removal going through the format at this point. That's it for the week. Let me know what you've been playing, what you've been liking. If you're looking for content, we put out a bunch of gameplay videos. A lot of what I was trying to do this last week, we tried to cover pretty much all the tier lists. I was trying out some brews the last little bit. We tried out a Jeskai Snapcaster deck. Like the idea, execution wasn't the best on it. We had a Naya Winota, Naya 4, or actually 5 color, Neoform Winota deck that's out. So there's a couple different decks that we tried to brew up. We did like a Death and Taxes list. So I'm trying out a bunch of things. They're not necessarily always, 50, like, or even more, like 60, 70% win rate, but the intent's to try out these strategies, see if we can kind of break away from red, black, X decks and see what else the format has to offer. So lots of gameplay on the channel as well. We'll be back with best of 3 and the other formats later in the week. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a great one and stay safe out there.